In the last 48 hours, there's been a bit of a diplomatic row between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia. You've recalled your ambassador. You've told their ambassador it's time to go back to Beirut. Are we in the middle of a diplomatic crisis?
I don't think I would call it a crisis. I think we have come to the conclusion that dealing with Lebanon and its current government is not productive and not helpful. With Hezbollah's continuing dominance of the political scene, and with what we perceive as a continuing reluctance by this government and Lebanese political leaders in general to enact the necessary reforms, the necessary actions to push Lebanon in the direction of real change, we have decided that I think engagement at this point is not productive or useful, and it's not really in our interest.
Well, at the end of the day, though, I mean, this minister's comments that apparently touched off the latest row were essentially saying that the war in Yemen is futile. Isn't that the conclusion that Saudi Arabia, in a sense, has come to? I mean, you guys are trying to get out, no?
So the comments by the minister are a symptom of a reality that the political scene in Lebanon continues to be dominated by Hezbollah, a terrorist group, a group that, by the way, arms and supplies and trains the Houthi militia. So for us, it is broader than just the comments of one minister. It is more an indication of the state that Lebanon is in.
So it's not really just taking issue with these latest comments.
That's correct.
One has to wonder why anybody's listening to Lebanon's politicians at this point anyway.
Which is why we don't think there's a need for our ambassador to be in Lebanon.
Latest news, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is upset, lashing out at Lebanon. Bahrain urges citizens in Lebanon to leave as rift widens. An escalating Saudi dispute weakens Lebanon, may help Hezbollah. This is the latest news. Associated Press headliner, why Saudi Arabia is upset, lashing out at Lebanon. Televised remark by a game show host turned cabinet minister in Lebanon about the war in Yemen has taken the country's crisis with Saudi Arabia to new depths. Anger over George Kordahi's comments led to steps by Gulf Arab countries that further isolate Lebanon and threaten to split its new coalition government tasked with halting the government's economic meltdown. Punitive measures from Saudi Arabia, once an important ally that poured millions of dollars into Lebanon, could cause more economic pain. The kingdom has banned all Lebanese imports, a major blow to the country, whose main trading partners are in the Persian Gulf. It is the latest escalation in the rivalry that has long played out in Lebanon between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Tensions have dragged on for years over the dominant role in Lebanon of the Iranian-backed militant Hezbollah group. Now Saudi officials insist it's pointless to deal with the government of Beirut after so much drift toward Iran. But what is really behind Saudi's angry response, and what does it mean for the already embattled Lebanon? The immediate spark were comments by Kordahi, who gained popularity in Arab world for hosting Who Wants to Be a Millionaire on a Saudi-owned TV network. During a mock parliamentary streamed online last week, Kordahi fielded questions from an audience of young people from the region. In one answer, he called the war in Yemen absurd and said that the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels have attacked no one and have the right to defend themselves. The online program was recorded about a month before Kordahi was named information minister in the government of Prime Minister Najib Mikati, formed in September. Kordahi was named by a mainly Christian party allied to Hezbollah. Saudi officials blasted the remarks as offensive and biased toward the Houthis. Since 2015, the Saudi-led coalition has been fighting the Houthis, who a year earlier took control of the capital, Sana'a, in northern parts of Yemen. Most commentators have said that they believe Kordahi's comments were a pretext for the Saudis to vent their frustration at Iran's influence in Lebanon. Saudis don't know what they want. Growing Iranian influence in Lebanon, but they don't know what to do about it, said Joseph Baru, research director at the American University of Beirut. Saudi Arabia has long been a close ally of politicians in Lebanon's Sunni Muslim community, which chooses the prime minister under the country's sectarian system. But the kingdom never forged the divided community into a strong political proxy the way the Shiite Hezbollah, with its powerful armed force, became Iran's stalwart ally in Lebanon. Particularly since the 2005 assassination of its most powerful ally, former Prime Minister Rafik Hariri, the kingdom lost its tools of influence. Under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known for his assertive, some say harsh foreign policy, Saudi Arabia took sporadic action trying to oppose its will, but failed to develop a cohesive strategy or find new, well-rooted allies. You could only watch as Hezbollah and its allies came to dominate more recent Lebanese governments. Saudi Arabia's most drastic move came in 2017 when it formed then Prime Minister Saad Hariri to announce his resignation, citing Hezbollah's domination in a televised statement from a brief visit to the kingdom where he was apparently held against his will. The incident backfired. Hariri returned home and revoked his resignation, supported by Hezbollah and its allies. He lost Saudi backing. Relations have been chilly since. Last spring, Saudi authorities banned import of all Lebanese products over allegation they were used for drug smuggling. Most recently, Riyadh refused to back McCarthy as prime minister because of his coalition with Hezbollah. The Saudis found themselves alone when Washington and Paris expressed support for McCarthy after Lebanon had been without a government for over a year. Frustrated, the Saudis appear to have gone for a strong move over Kordahi's comments. Saudi Arabia, as well as the United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Bahrain, withdrew their ambassadors from Lebanon and expelled Lebanese envoys to the kingdom. Al Jazeera headliner, Bahrain urges citizens in Lebanon to leave as rift widens, dated November 2nd, 2021. Bahrain has called on its nationals in Lebanon to leave the country immediately, news state agency reported. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Bahrain has urged all citizens in Lebanese Republic to leave immediately, following the tense situation there, which calls for extra caution, the Foreign Ministry said in a statement carried by official Bahrain news agency on Tuesday. The ministry reiterated its previous statements on not to travel to the Lebanese Republic definitively in order to prevent the citizens from being exposed to risks and to ensure their safety, the statement continued. A similar move was taken by fellow GCC member, United Arab Emirates, on Sunday, which called for its nationals to leave Lebanon as soon as possible. Saudi Arabia expelled Lebanon's envoy and banned all Lebanese imports on Friday, and Bahrain and Kuwait followed suit. The United Arab Emirates also withdrew its diplomats from Beirut and banned its citizens from traveling to Lebanon. Relations between Lebanon and Saudi Arabia has already stretched thin, with the latter having imposed an indefinite ban on Lebanese products since April after foiling an amphetamine smuggling attempt. Tensions escalated after comments made by Lebanese information minister against Riyadh's role in Yemen war surfaced last week. On Monday, the office of Lebanese Prime Minister Nabil Mikati stated that the Emir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim Al Hamad Al Thani, will send the Qatari foreign minister to Beirut to search for ways to solve the Lebanese Gulf crisis. Yemen has been engulfed by violence and instability since 2014, when the Houthi rebels captured much of the country, including the capital, Sana'a. A Saudi-led coalition intervened the following year with the aim of reinstating the Yemeni government, but has worsened since the situation started. The war in Yemen and ensuing economic collapse, as well as restrictions on imports to Houthi-held areas, have caused what the United Nations says is the world's biggest humanitarian crisis, with 16 million people facing starvation. UPI headliner, escalating Saudi dispute weakens Lebanon, may help Hezbollah, dated November 2nd, 2021. Harsh criticism of Saudi Arabia and insulting remarks were repeated voiced by Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah over the years. Moreover, former Minister Gebran Basil, a Hezbollah ally and son-in-law of Baoun, repeatedly adopted Hezbollah's positions, especially when he voted against a semi-Arab consensus on Syria at an Arab League meeting last May. Former Foreign Minister Chab el-Webi had to quit after provoking the anger of Gulf states, whom he blamed for the rise of the Islamic State. The peak was the continuous smuggling of drugs from Lebanon to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. Riyadh said it had confiscated millions of white amphetamine pills, known as Captagon, hidden in fruit and vegetable shipments from Lebanon. In response, it decided to ban all Lebanese fruits and vegetables. It is an accumulation with Lebanon adopting Hezbollah's positions, and this has basically escalated to the situation to where we are now. Mohammed Haj Ali, an analyst and fellow at the Beirut-based Carnegie Middle East Center, told UPI. The Gulf countries, led by Saudi Arabia, are basically saying enough. The new Saudi Gulf escalation, Haj Ali said, will rather benefit Hezbollah. These measures are impacting the population, further weakening the state, and ironically could be benefiting Hezbollah, bringing Lebanon closer to the Iranian and Syrian regimes. By opposing a ban on Lebanese products that reached $1.4 billion to Gulf Cooperation Council countries in 2020, many see the new Saudi measures as punitive and harmful to the Lebanese population, rather to Hezbollah. However, Saudis could no longer sustain such an approach against them. They want to put a red line. While the United States is imposing sanctions on Hezbollah for the past 2 years, targeting its source of funding and punishing individuals and institutions behind it while trying not to harm Lebanon's economy. What the Saudis are doing is very different, said Fawzi Kabbara, Lebanon's former ambassador in Washington. They are punishing Lebanon by expelling its ambassadors and stopping its exports, Kabbara told UPI. He explained that Riyadh's new measures were not in line with the United States and French approach toward Lebanon. France is talking to Hezbollah day and night, and the U.S. has an open channel to bringing gas from Egypt via Syria to help Lebanon's acute power crisis, Kabbara said. The new Saudi measures are a defensive action. Saudis could no longer sustain such an approach from Lebanon against them, and they want to put a red line. The Americans are not really taking the Saudi anger seriously. They are committed to the maintenance of the Makati government for a reason, Kashashi had once stated. In September, Makati succeeded in forming a new government, ending more than a year of stalemate that accelerated after the collapse of the crisis-ridden country and further plunged the population into poverty. If he resigns, forming a new cabinet will be difficult and could lead to the cancellation of general elections scheduled for March 27th, 2022. Hezbollah does not care and does not lose anything if the Saudis impose a draconian measure on Lebanon, Kashan said. The Saudis are frustrated and venting their anger at the weakest link, which is Lebanon. He, however, noted that Saudi Gulf-Lebanon relations will not get worse, but will not get any better. At the end, it all depends on the Vienna nuclear talks that are set to resume at the end of this month. He said the United States wants to neutralize Iran's proxies in the region. To Iran, its proxies in the region are more important than the nuclear program, and Hezbollah is more important than a nuclear bomb. Ruining countries like Lebanon and making them an easy bite is what Iran needs to take over completely, Kashan said. That's the latest news. Now, my thoughts. This all could be easily explained as the continuing Sunni-Shiite war that has been raging for decades, even longer. The Saudis themselves are alienating their allies by not continuing to have their ambassadors in the key ports where the Shiites are the strongest. The problem here is diplomatic relations are no longer on the table. With the Saudis and the Gulf partners, one is conflict. Same thing in regards to Israel when it comes to Iran. The Saudis are looking at it from a different perspective than Israel, in that they see this as a religious war, a war between the minority Sunni Shiite population against the majority Sunnis. However, the majority of the Sunnis do not agree with Saudi diplomacy or their prejudicial point of view in regards to the matter at hand. The United States, unfortunately, is influenced by its two major powerful foreign lobbyists between the Gulf and Israel. Saudi Arabia themselves could basically do themselves a favor by not allowing Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince, to dictate his harsh policies as the voice of the Gulf. Unfortunately, leaders of Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, don't have the backbone because Saudi Arabia is the prominent force. And they have to fall in line, or else they'll get the treatment afforded to them like Lebanon, Syria, Libya, and maybe even Iran. Don't forget Iraq. These countries themselves are victimized by the ongoing war on terror, which is a fraud. If there was a real war on terror, we would be attacking the Gulf. That is where the Wahhabi Salafist organizations originated from. It's not Hezbollah that attacked us on 9/11. It wasn't the Iranian Revolutionary Guard who bombed the USS Cole off the port of Aden, Yemen. It wasn't Syria who attacked the US embassies in Tanzania and Kenya in 1998. These were all Salafist jihadist organizations like Al Qaeda, supported by Gulf money throughout the 1990s as a form of blackmail so that Al Qaeda wouldn't attack the Gulf, who they considered too westernized or under the influence of Western governments. Al Qaeda would actually be correct, ironically enough. Diplomacy is what leads to peace, not bullets or bombs. And if the war on terror wasn't proof enough that you can't kill terror by enforcing terror on the public, then I fear that the war that we'll see next, if it isn't a revisit to the Cold War, will be the war that the Saudis and Israelis want and the neocons in the United States government want, which is a war of attrition between the Shiites and the Sunnis, a war that would devastate the region and devastate hegemony between the Middle East, the Sunnis, the Shiites, the United States, and all the citizens that would be affected by this physically, economically, and spiritually.